and food addict. I'm abstinent today by the grace of God and the help of this community. And I know I'm abstinent because, like all of you, I plan 3 weighed and measured meals a day from the grey sheet. I write my food down. I commit it to a sponsor. I don't eat anything in between my meals, no matter what. And I make protecting my abstinence the most important thing in my life. And my abstinence is, I follow this way of life without exception. And I love that about this fellowship. There's no exception, you know, oh, my shoelace snapped, so I ate extra, or some food fell on the floor. I didn't bother to tell anybody, and I went ahead and, you know, just did my own thing. This is for me without exception. So I have a constant connection with others around how to protect the most precious thing in my life, which is abstinence from compulsive eating and food addiction. My abstinence date is the 25th of March 2006, and so I'm celebrating, I think it's 14 years, 10 months, and yeah, I didn't work it all out, but here I am, and it's a miracle, a day at a time, a meal at a time. But I'm not sort of white knuckling it. There's no, you know, hanging onto my chair between meals, you know, desperately starving, obsessing about eating again, wishing there was foods that I could eat that I can't eat, and all of that's gone. So, and when I first got here 14 and some years ago, I was in a terrible state. So you wouldn't really recognize me. I'm sorry I don't have a before picture to show you, but trust me, there was the difference between, you know, the sort of outward manifestation of the illness, how I ended up and how I am today are 2 different people. The biggest change has been the inside change, that GreySheeters Anonymous way of life, the 12-step program of recovery, the Grey Sheet food plan. The whole way that I've been taught to live my life has resulted in me having, you know, deep self-respect that I never had when I got here. And it's also taught me about what it feels like to have dignity. And that's been restored. You know, when I was in the food, having time and time again promised that this time it was going to be different, or, you know, I'd swear off a certain food group, or I'd embark on yet another maniacal sort of exercise regime coupled with metabolic enhancers, which was just a fancy way of saying speed. Doing all of those things, and then you know, the devastation of it all, just ending up back in the packets and the boxes and the deluge, as some of you may identify. You know, I didn't eat prettily. I didn't get to GreySheeters Anonymous because I you know, I just overate once or twice at a party. I didn't get to GreySheeters Anonymous because I failed a few diets. I got here because I was dying. As a young woman in my, you know, mid-30s, you know, sober from alcohol and drug addiction, miracle of 12-step recovery, but I couldn't get food abstinent in those fellowships. And it didn't matter how many prayers I said and how often I did a gratitude list and how much service I was doing in the fellowships to deal with my alcohol and drug addiction. And I had a sponsor in that fellowship who would say, just pray, do the same thing, admit your powerlessness over food and ask for your compulsive eating disorder to be removed. Pray for an abstinent day, just like you pray for a sober day. And I would do that, desperate as the dying, there's that saying in the 12 and 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous, as desperate as a drowning man is for a life preserver, I prayed on my knees for God to lift this compulsive eating disorder from me and to give me the ability to abstain. And yet day in and day out, I returned to the behavior, and I was baffled. I had no idea what was wrong with me. No idea that this is a progressive, critical, and fatal illness, and left untreated, I would end up dead. No idea how critically allergic I am to sugar, grains, and starch, that any minuscule amount of those food substances in my bloodstream metabolizes into alcohol, I believe, which sets off a phenomenon of craving, which means that I have absolutely no control over the quantities I eat. And the illusion at the time is that I'll just have the one, or I've worked so hard and I've been to gym every day this week and I've managed to white knuckle it that now I deserve a treat. That's where the mental obsession would come in. And so the treat, of course, was for this addict, for this compulsive eater, was a poisonous and terrifying slip into relapse, into major binging behavior. And so I didn't get here, like I said, because I just broke a few diets a couple of times. I got here having struggled all through my teens, all through my 20s, and most of my 30s with this horrendous progressive illness that I thought I was in control of. And I lived with the despair of not being able to do anything about it. And it was the despair and the self-loathing. I thought it was a moral issue. I thought I was weak-willed. I thought there was something, if I could just arrest further control, if I could just be a stronger, more determined, somehow more to find the magic elixir, the combination of exercise and diet and the right foods, and, desperate for a solution. And nothing worked until the darkest hour. They say that the darkest hour is before the dawn, and I met a GreySheeter. In fact, I'd met her long before I knew that she was a GreySheeter, and she was one of these women who you see from across a crowded room, and I was afraid of her because of her. She had grace, she had self-respect, she had dignity, she liked herself, but not in a kind of vain, cocky way. When she spoke with she was empowered. You could hear in her voice that she was comfortable in her own skin. And I was attracted to her, but I was terrified of her at the same time because, I never thought I could be friends with women like that. Other women I was afraid of because I constantly judged myself and judged you the whole time. So when she approached me in my darkest hour, of course, I fell apart in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I was crying. I was inconsolable. I was, screaming in the meeting, saying how much more wrong there was with me than me. I was just a recovering alcoholic, and how true that was, and saying how I didn't want to live anymore, and how being on my own at home was just unbearable. And she came and said, come and sit with me and let's have a chat. And I sat in that woman's car. And for the first time in my life, having struggled in regular OA for 4 years to get some kind of definition of abstinence and relapsing all the time. So I really understand the pain of people who struggle with relapse in the food. I get it. There's nothing I wouldn't wish it on anybody that desperate for a solution, being given all kinds of suggestions of what to do to get abstinent and not being able to. And I told this woman how much pain I was in and what was happening to me and how my binges are getting closer and closer together. My control was less effective, that everything I had tried to control it was not working anymore. And she just listened as the tears rolled down my face. I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. Like chest heaving sobs, those where you can't stop. And she just kept rubbing my shoulder and saying, and then she said, we have the same story. And I found a solution. So I have been restored from a hopeless state of mind and body. And how I've been restored is by following this way of life. I weigh and measure, she said, I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from a food plan called the GreySheet, and I do it without exception. I commit my food to a sponsor, I write my food down, etc. And I was just, it was like, she had my attention, like 100%. And this is someone who didn't really know me. She invited me into her home. She gave me my first set of scales. She did say, as she handed them to me, she said, I want these back. And she started to prepare my first abstinent lunch.
It's 10 minutes, Sharon.
Thank you, Suzanne. And show me what we eat at lunchtime and what we have at supper time. And I committed. So the following day was my day one. And so she said she would temporarily take my food. She showed me how to write my food down. She showed me what I could have. She showed me how to weigh. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better introduction, and just so magical. And that from that first moment, that first time, I knew I had found a solution that was perfect for me and what I needed. I went to my first Grey Sheet meeting that Saturday morning, and I walked in. It's the only meeting in London. It's a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and I sat down and I listened to you. And everything that the woman in that meeting said, I identified with. What it was like, what happened, and what their lives are like now. And I wanted what they had more than anything else I've ever wanted in my whole life. And I continue to want what you've got because it works. I'm not looking for an easier, softer way. I'm not looking for another food plan. The food on this plan is so delicious and so abundant. I'm never hungry. Food is just not my obsession. And what a miracle for a compulsive eater, food addict of my type. That in between, I get to live a life, in between these wonderful meals. And I'll finish on this just briefly. So this program, so just quickly, I got a sponsor very quickly, I had a temporary sponsor for a while, and then I got a full-time sponsor who took me out. I've got the same sponsor today. There was a period of time in the last 14 years where my first sponsor had a baby and she was doing other things in her life, so somebody else in this fellowship helped me for about 3 years, and then I reconnected with my first sponsor. And that woman has seen me through so much, finishing an education as a result of my abstinence, learning how to date healthily as a result of being abstinent. She's seen me through an engagement. She's been at my wedding. She's been part of my family, part of us growing up, and along with many other very special women in this fellowship. And so I went to a birthday party on what day is it today? Monday, on Saturday. And it was the first kind of outing. And we were in a bubble, in a special kind of dome, in a fancy hipster restaurant in central London. And I knew about it a couple of weeks before we were going. And I thought, I'm going to, as I always do, I write to the manager of the restaurant. I look at their menu. I ask them for what I need. I say, can I have this and this, and this is what I need to do. I'm treating a medical condition with a special diet, and here's what I need. And I got an email back saying that's absolutely fine. We'll give you everything you need. I still took full backup in my bag. I took 2 sets of scales. I took extra batteries. And my girlfriend, who I was joining to celebrate with, she has a kind of mixture of friends that I don't spend a great deal of time with. I see them once a year at her birthday. I knew I was going to be amongst women who don't really know me. But they've known me, they've seen me once a year for the last, 14 years at my friends' birthday do's with my scale. So they know that's what I do. So I felt comfortable I didn't feel worried about putting my scale on the table. The only thing I was worried about was when the food was going to be brought out, what I'd need to get extra. I knew I'd need, as it was coming, I could see already that the amount of green vegetable that I asked for wasn't going to be enough. And so I was happy, and I learned from another Grey Sheeter here, you can accept graciously what gets brought to you, as I've watched her do it.
1 minute left.
Thank you, Suzanne. And then you can weigh it. And this Grey Sheeter who I ate out with at a restaurant, if you get an opportunity, go with another Grey Sheeter who's got more experience than you. And she had a little notebook next to her plate, and she said, thank you very much. And then she weighed some of her vegetable, and she made a note of how much it weighed. And then she said, can you bring me another portion of that, please? And they did, so that she then got what she needed. And it was just so gracious and so lovely. And so I was nervous that I would have to keep asking them to go back to the kitchen more than once. And luckily they got it right the second time. So this program is transportable. I can share so many stories with you, but you've got my number. It's in the chat. If you want to ever outreach, don't hesitate. My next challenge is holiday to Tenerife on Thursday, and we've got a self-catering apartment. So and the farmers market across the road. So all set to enjoy a bikini-clad beach holiday for the first time in a year. We go away often normally, but because of COVID, we haven't been able to. So, but that's all thanks to GreySheet. I wouldn't be doing this kind of thing if I wasn't abstinent. So thanks for letting me share.